photorealism. Welcome, my fellow rotorheads. Thank you to Tolya for recommending me to review Digital Aeronautics' new Mi-2 helicopter, a Soviet-era workhorse that bears a passing resemblance to a flying camper van, and apparently has similar handling characteristics. There's a certain nuclear rust charm to this era of the Eastern Bloc's design ethos. I tend to associate such aircraft with the Chernobyl power plant exclusion zone, overgrown apocalyptic cities, and glowing river trout. I like the level of detail inside and outside this model. Everything is high resolution with 3D texture. You can see the rivets and wear of use. Inside has the appropriate utilitarian feel with the comically complex control panels, as if the Soviets were intending this machine to land on the moon and needed every conceivable switch to do it. I love it. The switches have a definitive resistance to them when trying to toggle them. You can almost feel how stiff they are, and at times they are actually hard to toggle. If you use their default hoplite livery, you'll find most of the dials and switches are in English, which is useful because there's definitely a process involved in successfully starting up this hedgehog, and you can refer to this video on how to do it, link in the description below. Once you've memorized the process, you can switch to a more retro Soviet livery for a more authentic experience.
Прекрасно.
I've heard that Microsoft's Flight Sim has limitations, making complete animation difficult, if not impossible, which would explain why no one seems to have gotten the rotor head completely right yet. There's a lot of detail in here, which is nice. You can see the blade pitch change with collective input from inside the cockpit, but as usual, not from cyclic movement, which in real life you would see. The swash plate does move up and down along with related blade pitch changes, but it doesn't tilt. None of the Microsoft models do that. One of the things you definitely do see is substantial coning during high G loading. That is when the helicopter is working hard to maintain lift. The blades flap up into a cone shape, which all helicopters do. If your rotors are coning, the landing you might be boning. This level of coning seems extreme to me, and I'm not sure if it represents reality or is just a flex on the part of Digital Aeronautics, but it's pretty impressive to see. I love that this has suspension. If you guys follow me, you know I consider suspension a key helicopter component, facilitating smooth, controlled pickups and touchdowns, and they do a great job with that here. Taxiing is really great in this model, once you figure out how to unlock the brakes. The parking brake is on the cyclic and it unlatches with a pin on the right side. Pull that out and you're good to roll. The aircraft taxis easily with minor collective and cyclic input. I remember having a lot of trouble with this aspect in the Mi-2's big brother, the Mi-17 by Serasim. I put both of them on a runway with a bit of an incline, like at Lukla Airport. The Mi-17 definitely did not like climbing the hill, and I was essentially forced to do a nose wheel takeoff just to taxi. The Mi-2, by comparison, had no problem negotiating the incline. There are lots of Mi-2 nose wheel takeoffs on YouTube, so I tried to see if it was possible with this model. It is, but it turns out to be a highly difficult maneuver, balancing a thrashing monster on one wheel and staying lined up with the center line. It'll take more practice to get good at it, but it's definitely possible. The flight model was a bit surprising, to be fair. There are some models where the flight model can't possibly be right. I've mentioned a couple in previous videos. This is not one of them. It flies like a helicopter, no doubt. But it's a lot more sedate than I expected for a rather clunky Cold War era machine. Not that the Mi-17 should be a reference per se, but I did compare how it handled in a circuit loop, and I found it to be somewhat more responsive, even for a large aircraft like this. It still felt large, but still a certain amount of responsiveness. I would argue more than the Mi-2, which is a substantially smaller aircraft. I can't argue for the accuracy of either flight model, as I've never personally flown or been in either one. Nevertheless, you guys know I'm kind of a stickler for realism in flight models, so I proceeded to do my standard torture tests. The first was testing tail authority. It felt to me like I had too much of it, being able to command substantial yaw even at cruise. I tested V&E by doing a spiral death dive and pinning the airspeed to its maximum limit, but never lost control of the aircraft. I'm sure in real life parts would be flying off, and I would personally love to hear someone on board yell out with mild cynicism some kind of Russian expletive.
Сука, бля!
However, I recovered with great aplomb. I tested for VRS. I like to do this at the old New York City World Trade Center so I can use it as a visual reference. Basically, you're testing for the helicopter's susceptibility to falling through its own column of downwash. You're supposed to get that when descending between 500 and 1,000 vertical feet per minute, because that's what happens in real life. It's basically airfoil stall, just like a regular wing. You end up falling all herky-jerky uncontrollably, but that didn't happen here. Then I yanked the collective all the way up and looked for indications of overtorque or some sort of warning, failure, something. But I couldn't find anything that would suggest the aircraft was uncomfortable with pilot abuse. However, I did successfully run a few auto rotations, so that does work. I did that by shutting off the engine power levers, lowering the collective all the way, and cruising to the nearest suitable landing spot before flaring and soft landing. Now, this is a model designed for Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, which apparently also works in 2024. Having both sims, I decided to try it out and see if everything worked or flew any differently. I didn't see anything notably different about its general operation. It started up and flew exactly the same way. There are only two things I noticed that seem to be different. In 2024, there seems to be smoke puffing out of it for some reason. I don't know if that's some sort of glitch or maybe interaction with some other mod. And also the sound cuts in and out in a strange way, which you can hear here. I understand Digital Aeronautics is working on some compatibility patches, as well as a fully 2024 version of the Mi-2. I saw that the model generally gets good reviews and people really seem to like it. I do think it's a nice helicopter. It flies a little sedate for my taste. I like my helicopter spicy and twitchy. I'm weird like that. But for nervous flyers and those that are not fringe freaks like me, and don't necessarily want to contend with all the subtle weirdnesses of realistic rotorcraft, which are surprising and plentiful, this is a nice model to have in your stable of helicopters, and you can use it to tool all around the Asia Major continent. I'd be curious to hear what an actual Mi-2 pilot thinks of it. Given the vintage of this machine and the general demographic of its native operators, there may not be that many of them around to say one way or the other. As you can imagine, I'll be releasing a vibro file for it soon because short of a shot of vodka before you strap in, nothing else delivers immersion like
Vibration strong like bear.
That's all I have for now. Until next time, keep the spinny side on top.
Huh? Yeah, boy.
Yeah, boy!